the mid-age group, they've moved from here to here already. So 10 times the relative risk of diabetes already. And it's being driven by BMI during the 20s. So the challenge for people involved in Sport for All is to say, well, why can't we keep people who are in their 20s involved in sport so that we can prevent weight gain? Now, if we look at weight gain in the young women, this is the amount of weight gained by physical activity levels. These women over here are reporting an hour of physical activity a day. They are still gaining weight. This is a real issue, and you would think, how can they be gaining weight if they're doing an hour of physical activity per day? And the answer probably is because they're sitting. Now, we heard a lot about sitting yesterday, both in the children's presentations and to some extent from Tim's slides. And when we look at sitting time and weight gain in our mid-aged women, this is weight, this is sitting time, you can see it increases. And some researchers around the world are looking at this and saying, well, this means that sitting causes weight gain. But of course it does not. What it means is that each additional hour spent sitting is associated with more weight. But does that mean sitting causes weight gain, or does it mean that people who are overweight sit more? These are cross-sectional data, so we can't tell where the cause and effect is. Is it because people who are overweight just like to sit? Or are they overweight because they sit? And we really need longitudinal data to explore that issue. And we've started looking at it, and it certainly seems to be true that this is sitting time along the bottom, and this is risk of weight gain. And we can see that women who sit for as little as 4.5 hours each day, and some sit for 6 and some for 8 hours a day, even after adjusting for physical activity and diet, are more likely to gain weight. So we have a problem in our populations in developing countries because physical activity typically looks like this. In a waking day of 16 hours, we spend about 9 hours sitting down. These are average data for adult Australians. 9 hours sitting in transport, at work, watching TV, socialising, going out for dinner. 9 hours sitting down, 6.25 hours just on your feet, as you would be if you were a nurse or a teacher, and only 38 minutes a day on average doing any sort of physical activity. This is why we have a problem of weight gain, so even if we're doing 30 minutes of physical activity against this sort of background, it's clearly not going to be enough. So we need to think about sport for all. What are these women doing? Are they playing any sport at all? Well, 15% of our women say they do nothing, no physical activity. And 43% of them walk regularly, that's good, but they're not involved in sport. But about 42% of them are involved in some sort of sport or recreational activity. Now these are middle-aged women in their 50s, which is very encouraging. Some are doing vigorous exercise, very few, 1%. Some are doing moderate and some are doing a mixture. So this is good. But what about these people and these people? When they were children, most of these women did participate in sport. So what happened? Think about it yourselves. When do women, and I would venture to suggest men as well, when do they stop playing sport and why? Don't think about yourselves, think about the general population. Say don't think about yourselves because I suspect you're very atypical. Well, in our cohort, we've been having a good look at physical activity patterns and why do the young women stop playing sport? When does vigorous activity drop out of their lives? You guessed it. And someone told me this is true for Malaysian women too. When women get married, they drop out of sport. It's a very interesting finding. This is not about having children, this is about getting married. So that becomes a health hazard, which is a very interesting one for us to address. And of course, physical activity levels fall even more once the family arrives. Now this could be very true for men as well, but we don't have any data about men yet. So when women get married and have children, they drop out of sport, and it's very rare for them to go back. So if you're seriously thinking about sport for all, you have to think about what are you going to do to try and overcome this barrier. We're clearly not going to stop people from getting married and having children, but we have to work out how to keep people involved in sport while they negotiate these life stages. Now, there are some ways of doing this, of course, and I don't think this is going to be one of them. But if sporting clubs think about childcare and think about supporting opportunities for women to be involved when they have small children, maybe they can keep them involved in sport for longer.
About 2 minutes.
Thank you. So what does this mean for healthy futures in Australia and around the world? I'd like to show you this graph. It's about functional capacity. It could be anything, aerobic capacity or any sort of function, increasing from when we're born till about puberty. And wouldn't it be lovely if when we reached our maximum we just stayed there until we get to about 83 and then we just drop dead? That would be wonderful. No need for a healthcare system at all. It doesn't happen. What really happens is that most people get to puberty, particularly girls, stop being physically active and they're on the downhill slide. But sport for all can keep us going a bit longer, typically till 20, and then along comes the marriage and the children and all the other things, the long working hours. But if we stay involved in sport, we could stay up here and become high-functioning adults. And the important thing here is, if we draw a line showing disability, these low-functioning ones get there and they're going to need a lot of care in old age. And what we're trying to do is push this along so that we have less disability. And I just want to show you some new findings we published just 1 month ago in Archives of Internal Medicine about a runners club in California. And I thought you would like this one because so many of you were out running last night. This is a cohort of men, 423 community controls and 538 runners in a club in California. We've been following these men since they were 50 and older in 1984, followed through to 2003. On this scale, this is an index of disability, increasing disability, and the controls disability is increasing as you would expect with age. But these are the runners. Not much difference in the first 3 years, but clearly less lower disability scores through to 2005. Now, if we take this score, 0.15, the controls crossed that in 1991. This is a level where they're going to start needing some help. But the runners didn't get there until 2004. So that is 13 years of disability-free life for the runners. This is after adjusting for any differences at baseline and for dropout and for all the other things that were done. I'd really encourage you to have a look at this article and see this is some of the best benefits I have ever seen for maintaining involvement in activities like running across the lifespan, even after age 50, to give 13 years of disability-free life. This is something government should be really interested in from the point of view of health costs. So in conclusion, the evidence on the health benefits of physical activity in mid-age and older adults is very strong. We know about it for cardiovascular disease, diabetes and cancer, and we're learning much more about it for cognitive decline and arthritis, which are going to be very important in the future. But physical activity levels fall in young adulthood for various reasons. They are improving in adult and middle age. We have our elite athletes, but the rest of the population is still single.
Yes. You may wish to stand there and take questions, or you could come back here. We have a mic here, whichever you prefer. Yes, okay. So now we open the floor for questions and comments. Please walk up to the mic, introduce yourself.
In countries, the cost of housing makes it such that both parents often have to work. So parents are working long hours, so they're sitting more, so they can't participate. They often have to buy a house miles away from where they work, so commuting time is long, and the whole time pressure thing is really difficult. So we heard yesterday about school physical activity and after-school programs, but the trick is, and I think actually in most countries the schools and the after-school programs are doing very well for the children. The problem comes at the end of school. It's very well documented that at the end of school people will drop out of sport. So getting those sport, the links between schools and community sport will be incredibly important. But also trying to get parents to be involved in sport with their children. I don't know what it's like in Aruba, but in Australia a lot of parents take their children to sport on Saturday and sit and watch while the children play, which is kind of a nice thing to do, but wouldn't it be wonderful if the parents played as well? But it's a very complicated problem, and it will involve sport and education and transport and health and planning and all of those government sectors. But I think the sort of health data that I showed you can really be used to hopefully to encourage governments to put more resources into to looking at the problem. Because at the end of the day, they'll have to foot the bill because of the health problems if we don't do something about it.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, that will be the last.
We have information on food intake, and when we're looking at the relationships between food intake and weight gain, of course there's a relationship, and if you eat more food you gain more weight. But the difference between eating a lot and eating a little is not as great as, for example, with sitting time and physical activity. Alcohol is a very interesting issue in the lives of young women in Australia. We have a little bit of a problem with this thing we call binge drinking, so they party, Saturday night party night, and they drink a lot, and the women who are binge drinking are certainly gaining weight more than the ones who don't, after adjusting for everything else. But as they get older, it's a life stage thing. So the binge drinking is a kind of student, young adult thing, and once, it's a good thing about getting married and having children, the binge drinking kind of stops. So it's all very interesting life stage patterns and changes in and out. And I've no doubt there's some binge drinking also associated with sport in Australia, especially, I would hasten to say, amongst men's sport. There's a lot of sponsorship from alcohol companies, and also a lot of celebration after sport which involves alcohol. So it's complex, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy.